The NU Viability ranking started has finally gotten another update. This is a huge one, so we've got a lot to talk about today. We got new Pokemon getting ranked like Florges and Klefki. We've got rises of Pokemon like GLASTRIER, Avalugg, Chansey. And we got drops of previous metagame staples like Sandaconda. Now, if you've been enjoying the content as of late, make sure to do subscribe so you never miss an upload like one of these. You know, we get PS Lives, we get meta discussions, you really get everything you could ask for here, so... Hey, you've been enjoying the content like I said, make sure you subscribe so we can hit our goal of 10K by the end of next year. Now, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm actually going to start with the removal of some old Pokemon, and why is that? Because there are a couple here that I want to draw specific attention to. There's a little bit of a talk that I always like to do, where I talk about the difference between usable Pokemon and viable Pokemon. And I think some of these Pokemon do deserve a little bit of that clarification on. But also I want to talk about Hisui and Sneasel completely falling off. This is a huge shift. We have a couple really big changes. This is one of them. Going from B to completely unranked is quite the large shift. And the reason's pretty clear. We have Gligar in the tier, and Hisui and Sneasel really doesn't have any good way of beating up on Gligar. Now, you could run something like... I guess you could do something like Terra Blast Ice. That's really your only method. Because otherwise, what are the standard sets we have seen on Swords Dance, Hisui and Sneasel, right? We have had... Wow, words. We've had Terra Grass Trailblaze. That's just not beating Gligar. A lot of them run Acrobatics even, but also they'll just Toxic you and then you turn out into a Pokemon that just beats you. You know, you're gonna have to get multiple Trailblaze boosts to guarantee outspeed some of these Scarfers. And it's not like there aren't other Pokemon in the tier that still give this Mon trouble. You've got Terra Ghost Pokemon, like Sandaconda still existing technically, although you wouldn't run that alongside Gligar. But you got Mons like Avalugg, that commonly run Terra Ghost. Chansey can be Terra Ghost, so someone could just go out to one of those. Same with something like a Glastrier. You've got Pokemon like Scarfmiss Magius that could give you issues. Now, if you get a Trailblaze, you'll outspeed it, but Miss Magius still forces some awkward 50-50s, especially if they want to pretend to be Terra Fire. Because then you might want to, you know, try and predict that instead of Trailblaze up. It's just kind of awkward. And Gligar is 100% the biggest reason. Sneasel, Johto, which isn't what they call it at all, but Johto Sneasel being decent also kind of plays into this, because you can't use them both on the same team. And although Johto Sneasel isn't very good, it's still a knock to the Mon's viability, right? Because one of them, like, Johto Sneasel's just better than Hisui Sneasel at this point. So why would I really use Hisui Sneasel when I could have, like, both Johto Sneasel and Intoxicroak on the same team? Like, Croak can actually beat Gligar. I can knock it. I can Ice Punch it. I have means of making real progress. The best you can do on Hisui Sneasel is maybe something with a choice item. So you're going to be looking at Switcheroo on a Choice Band or Choice Scarf set. And I do think those have a little bit of potential. Because with Gligar especially, you could steal an Eviolite. That's a super useful item. And then maybe you displace the Eviolite as well later if you need to remove something else's item. Maybe you want some boots and you want to trick an Avalugg, you know, an Eviolite instead. That is an angle you could take. But this mod is very clearly not the same progress maker it used to be. Maybe we'll see it get re-ranked in the future if someone's able to do something like I said with one of these choice item sets, but for now, it is completely fallen off. Appleton, another Pokemon that used to be a metagame staple that is no longer even ranked. This is definitely one of those cases of usable versus viable, where I do think that Appleton is still a perfectly usable Pokemon. It's got a bit different of a defensive profile compared to Goodra, in large part thanks to Thick Fat, with something like Terra Poison. That lets you actually check Paldean Tauros very, very well. Something like Goodra, you always gotta play to both your Terra and your normal typing, and try and bait your opponent into using the wrong move versus you. The problem with Goodra, of course, even in that sort of sequence, is its physical bulk isn't very good, and it doesn't have as good of a recovery move as Appleton. You're stuck using something like Life Dew if you want recovery, and that's just not really cutting it most of the time. Appleton also has a lot better physical bulk, so you can keep checking Mr. Paldean Tauros Blaze. So there is a clear niche there, and you know, still does a lot of the same that it used to do with the generally useful resistances. I think at the end of the day, Goodra just is so much better as a defensive mon. Not even a defensive mon, just like an offensive mon that has a lot of good defensive traits. Goodra's got the better move pool at this point. Goodra also completely blanking things like Shaman Leech Seed, Shaman Seed Flare, Rotom Leaf Storm, Hisui Electro Leaf Storm. It's about as good of a check too to something like Jolteon, so you're not really gaining much of anything with Appleton in that matchup. It's just a lot harder to justify Appleton by this point. And then Charizard gets unranked. There was a little bit of talk about the merit to Manual Sun, but as you can see, we unranked all of Charizard, Leafeon, and Scovillain, because Manual Sun has just not seen any meaningful play. Really all there is to them. Alolan Golem, that gets unranked. I think partly too, there are a couple reasons. It was originally ranked in Copper-Raja meta, where that mon was the best Stealth Rocker by a country mile. And, you know, it at least had the argument that you could trap Raja better than Magneton. Because Raja was always running Special Bulk, generally. Not always, I guess, but 95% of the time. And then Alolan Golem hits it on that softer side. But now that Chansey Lug is like how you define the balance slash kind of bulkier angle to teams, what am I trapping? Not really anything. Haunter gets unranked. Like, Haunter's another mon that's like perfectly usable. There's even something like Chansey. I'm just switcherooing you a Scarf, man. Or I'm going for sub Nasty Plot, and if you don't have something like Shadow Ball Chansey, then you just toast. At the end of the day, Haunter's issue is that you just get outclassed by Mismagius. Like, yeah, Mismagius doesn't have dual stab, but I'm faster. And I've got a little bit more moveset versatility, I would still say, overall. Between, like, Nasty Plot with sub leftovers and then, like, Draining Kiss. You got the offensive Nasty Plot sets. You've got Specs, which isn't great, but it's okay enough. You've got Scarf sets that are really good utility for offensive teams, with moves like Memento and Destiny Bond. It's just, all of that put together kind of puts a damper on Haunter's overall potential use. And the metagame is just so much stronger now as well. Haunter isn't threatening the same kind of Okos and 2-hit KOs that it once did, because Pokemon Copper-Raja are just, you know, they're bulkier. You know, we can even just, I mean, I'll even just look at the rises here. You know, Chansey's hard to beat down. Skuntank is actually kind of getting some usage now. Even in the drops, you can see Goodra, that's a Pokemon that always gives it some issues. There's just a lot going on here. Also, yeah, I will definitely talk about why I disagree with some of these rises and drops. Don't you worry, I'm sure you saw some of them that looked weird. Probopass gets unranked. It should never have been ranked. That's all I have to say. Pyroar gets unranked. It was ranked originally because people still kind of appreciated outspeeding Scyther. That was one of the big reasons Pyroar was so good in the previous metagame before we got some of the DLC stuff. And even though Scyther is still an absolute Chad in this metagame, it runs Quick Attack a lot more now. So outspeeding Scyther, when you're trying to Revengeful Sword Stance set, and you're like, oh, it hasn't used Trailblaze yet. Don't worry, I can still outspeed it. You just get popped by Terra Normal Quick Attack. It's one of the worst feelings in the world. And otherwise, I mean, you're trying to wall break with Pyroar, like, okay. I gotta get past a Goodra. I gotta get past a Chansey. I gotta deal with the myriad of offensive teams running around. It is a lot to take in. You know, Scarf Bruxish is even better now. Jolteon is still incredible. Hisuian Electrode gets a lot of use. It's just really hard to find your footing. And then Ursaring gets unranked. It's partly just a matter of it's not seen any use in so long. Like, there's comes a time where you can't even justify it, but Chansey kind of takes over the role of that specially defensive normal type at this point. We did see Rest Talk Ursaring get usage in previous metas with not even like Rest Talk bulk up, but just like Rest Talk 2 attacks. Chansey just has that niche on lockdown, and again, Goodra kind of plays into that too, where if you do want just a generic special wall, Goodra's a pretty good one. Nice tank there. And then the bulk up sets, Avalugg, you're not breaking that mon, ever. And a lot of them even will run Iron Defense or Curse and just really say, no, you're not breaking me, stop trying. So it gets a little bit dire there. And also in this metagame, we've kind of just seen the slow-paced setup is not nearly as good anymore as it used to be. So, something like the Dunsparce, people still do put a lot of respect on it. But even that mon is kind of struggling. It's A- still, so is it really struggling? No. But it could be so much better. We saw what peak to Dunsparce looks like, and even it doesn't get a ton of use because it's hard to really get going with these mons. And Ursaring struggles even further because you can't run leftovers on it, you're always going to be a Violite, and your only source of recovery in terms of a move is rest, and that's just not very good. That's a lot more than I would normally say, by the way, about a ton of unranked's, but some of these I wanted to talk about. And yeah, Typh unranked is literally just spamming Eruption is a task not really suited for most mortals. And yeah, let's get to the new mon. So Florges, why are we starting with Drifblim? Florges, I'm starting with Florges. Fuck you, Skier. Florges gets put up into S because, yeah, it's Florges, man. This mon's incredible. Specs is great. Scarf I haven't used, but it sounds fine. The Calm Mindsets are dastardly. And even just having a bulky fairy type in a metagame that for so long has been dominated by Goodra. That is immaculate. Oh, I meant to take this out. Yeah, we had a little mistake where, for some reason on the VR shift, actually no, I know the reason. Mary, I think, thought Typhlosion was a new mon, because it's seen literally, like, no use. So yeah, realizing it was on the VR to begin with was probably a shocker. But yeah, I moved it from up here to removed, because it was C rank to begin with. And yeah, Florges, it's just incredible. It does so much so well. Its stat checks a lot as well, where the special bulk is just so great that you're even able to keep some Pokemon like Hisui, Electro, Jolteon at bay. Even something like Hoopa. If you're not switching it to Psyshock, of course, because Psyshock kind of smokes your pack, but you can keep that mon even at bay for quite some time. Just through how bulky you are, you can match the setup attempts of Pokemon like, say, Calm Minded Dunsparce. Even something like Nasty Plot Mesprit, I mean, you can try and match up versus. You could tech something like Terra Steel onto your Florges if you wanted as well. Definitely a good option. I mean, Steel is just a generally great defensive typing, and Florges gets Wish Protect. So if you want to run one of those like Moonblast, Wish Protect, Calm Mindsets, you could be a Steel type with recovery, and that's quite strong. Klefki goes up to A. This one might be like a little shocking, because Klefki, I don't think has really taken the tier by storm, but it is a really good mon. As Skier writes, checking Scyther is probably one of the biggest reasons, because you're like actually good flying resist. We have not had a ton of those. And Klefki just kind of puts a damper on everything Scyther wants to do, because you got that T-Wave, you've got Foul Play, so if it Swords Dances up, it stays in, looking to do something new with close combat. Well, that's a really good way for it to just lose on the spot. And its overall utility move pool is so diverse. You could do screens, you could do weather support if you need. You could just be a standard spiking set with your great defensive typing letting you check Pokemon like Florges. Even Shaman, I guess, if you switch into Seed Flare, fine. It's just, like he writes too, it's another fairy type. That's kind of huge. We've been without fairy types for so long. Now we have two incredible ones. It feels good. Now, Alolan Sandslash up to B+. I thought this was a little high of a rating. I think I voted it B. But it does actually make snow teams usable. And that's huge. Now, you may wonder, how do you ever beat an Avalugg? Well, you run Low Kick. Low Kick is like the only real way this mon can function into the Avalugg GLASTRIER meta. And you could say, yeah, just run Iron Head instead. Iron Head's kind of bad. I think you want Low Kick, because it gives you better neutral coverage alongside knockoff and your ice move. And that way this mon ends up being walled by an awful lot less. We haven't seen like one particular snow team pop up yet that has really started dominating like we did last gen, where Hoenn confirmed had the like, I think it was what, Arctivish, Aurorus, Alolan Sandslash, Decidueye, Galgivapo, I think it was something like that. We saw though teams like that pop up last gen. We haven't yet seen one for Snow this gen. I do think with time we'll probably see people start optimizing that build and it'll start looking a lot stronger. Vikavolt and B-, there's just not really any reason to use it over the other electrics. It's far slower, and although it hits like 20 freight trains, this is a Chansey meta, so you can keep volting forever, and that is a perfectly good way of dealing with Chansey. It's just kind of like, are you ever really beating it? Maybe, but you gotta get a lot of turns right in a row with your pivoting, and it can be hard to actually have that go successfully for you. Also, something like Gligar, quite literally being able to block your Volt Switch and check your Bug Buzz secondary stab, it's kind of bleak. So, not a great mon. I think there's some use with some pivot set that, like I alluded to, with Volt Switch, Bug Buzz, T-Bolt, and then, like, Energy Ball. I think that could probably be serviceable. At that point, though, I think you're better off with a Jolteon, assuming Electro, just, you know, something faster that's still, at least in the case of Jolteon, pretty strong. And like I said, we already... Alright, we can go up to Drifblim again. Drifblim we put in, like, B, because Florges makes this mon's life a living hell. Not Florges, Goodra. But also, this mon was kind of bad when it was leaving the tier, and it comes back to the meta being just as hostile, if not more hostile. So, you know. I mean, the big thing too, Defog, Drifblim, I'm just like, what am I beating with this? What hazard centers am I beating? Am I beating Gligar? I'm switching in and I'm getting Toxic'd. Am I beating Chansey? Okay, I guess, but it's T-waving me? And I don't really do anything back to it? So, you know, that's not really anything. Also, you know, Stealth Rock Power Points outlast. It also has Natural Gear, so I can't even Will-O-Wisp a Chansey. You know, am I beating Copperaja? I guess I'm beating Copper, sure, but it's gonna knock my boots the first time I switch in, and then it'll switch out every time I come in to remove those hazards. And then I lose. I am no longer a Pokemon if those hazards ever get up, and even if I can keep them off, they're just gonna keep switching out as I defog, and I'm gonna see momentum some stupid threat like Jolteon or Rotom Mow. I would say a Dark type here, but we don't really have offensive Dark types at the moment. I guess Skuntank? Something like that. Yeah, let's get into the Horizon. We got some really fun ones here. So Salazzle goes up to S finally. I think people really lately have recognized just how oppressive the Pokemon is through how great of the utility options it possesses are. How damn scary that Nasty Plot set is. I mean, like let's think about all the moves that you get. Between your dual stabs, you've got Toxic, Protect, Knockoff, Encore, Nasty Plot, Endeavor, Taunt. Technically Sub if you want to throw it. There's like 7 really good moves you can throw in, and yeah, you'll never have all of them. Oh, I'll throw in Endure as well. You can do Nasty Plot Endure with a Salic Berry. But there's so much to this mon. You can use it on just about any archetype you want, which of course always helps out a Pokemon for its overall viability. When you've got something that can fit on just about any type of build, it just becomes easy to find use cases for it. You can, you know, we call it, I'm on being very malleable. Also, I keep knocking my mic, so I'm gonna sit down so that I do not knock it out of the plug. But it's very easy to find teams where you want to use a Salazzle and it actually fits, because you could find a set that's gonna do what you need. I mean, Amon is fast, it's decent defensively, not because of the stats, but typing at least gives you some resistances that you can use as like a panic button. And then you're able to use your Terra a lot of the time as well to flip. Alright, so as I was saying before Mike so rudely cut out, you're able to utilize your Terra type to flip a lot of bad offensive matchups on their head. So a Bruxish wants to revenge with Psychic Fangs. Alright, I Terra Dark. A Decidueye wants to revenge kill you with boosted Shadow Sneak. Alright, I Terra Dark. A Suing Electrode or Jolteon wants to pivot on you with Volt Switch. Alright, I Terra Ground. Oh, something wants to... I don't know why this would matter too many times, but CC you because you're weak and you're low. Haha, I Terra Ghost! So there's quite a lot of useful options there. Ends up making dealing with this one quite a headache, because you got ways around your offensive counterplay. And defensive counterplay, like we alluded to earlier, we got Taunt, we got Encore, we got Toxic, we got Knockoff. And the Encore sequences, I mean, think back to, I think it was the HO video we did lately, which I've done a lot of, so it's not too clear. But we had a Salazzle versus Chansey sequence go. The Chansey went for CM, I Encored it. Now my opponent did not need to stay in for the next like 20 turns, but they did. And Salazzle just beat them down. Because what are you supposed to do? You would need T-Wave Chansey really to ever limit Salazzle that effectively. Also, Terra Ghost good for the Chansey matchup, I should mention that. And because of how malleable this mon is to teams, you could kind of just always fit it on a build. It's not always going to be optimal, of course, because, you know, you don't want to just force a mon onto a team because you want to use it. But it's one of those bonds where if you do end up wanting to do that, it's not gonna, like, punish you. It is a genuinely just really good mon that has a lot of teams. It's pretty easy to find at least some spot for. Now we get Bruxish rising up to A+. I made a good point of this in my post where I'm like, this is just the best Scarfer in the tier if you want to run a Scarfer. Flip turn is pretty unblockable outside of Croak, which has to roll the dice if you Scyfangsing it. But beyond there, since we lost Brute Bonnet to a ban, since we lost Grimmsnarl to tier shifts, the mon has just gotten better. Now I do think this is a bit of a weird case, because Bruxish, if you look at SCL win rates and usage, has not actually been doing that well. I think the biggest limiter for Bruxish is it's kind of awkward to team build, which I have felt when I've tried using it. And it doesn't really offer you anything defensively. And offensively, you still do have to kind of risk the Gamut. That's not how you use that phrase, but I wanted to use it just for fun. You gotta roll the dice of running into some really awkward 50-50 matchup spams. Where say they got a Terra Dark Glazzle and then like a Toxicroak, there's a chance every turn you will just get blocked. Or you'll risk giving a free turn to something like, say, you know, Nasty Paw Salazzle for it to set up. Or maybe to Decidueye if you lock into Wave Crash. Or Toxicroak if you lock into Wave Crash. So there's some pretty clear issues that it faces. I just think it's always felt so good to use when I get a team with it that works. And we get Gligar up to S. Some people might wonder why Gligar rose up. All the way to S at least. I think you just have to look at the tournaments. And even ladder. I think Gligar has been absolutely consistent beyond consistent. It fits well in the Chansey Lug core. We've talked about that enough. But also as a Volt blocker, mon's quite hard to take out with your coverage. Jolteon's still not running Terra Blast Ice too much. Helps a lot because you can EV for +1 Terra Fairy, Terra Blast. That's pretty helpful. You blanket check like every physical attacker, particularly the fighting types. They really have to go out of their way to actually put down Gligar. Just like Salazzle, it's super malleable to teams. I mean, I'll do the thing again, where past Earthquake and a Hazard, you've got U-Turn, Acro, Toxic, Taunt, Knockoff. Like, you've got a lot that you can go with in this mon. And Florges dropping is all the better for it, because now you actually have a Wish Pass partner. And that's quite good. The biggest issue for Gligar had been that it was kind of vulnerable to chip damage, especially when you're talking about mons that it's trying to switch into, such as, say, Jolteon, for example. You have to tank those Terra Blasts. Toxicroak potentially knocking you in and hitting you with Life Orb plus combats. Something like Paldean Tauros with its strong Choice Banded CCs or Flare Blitzes. Now there's actually a way to stave off that chip in spite of losing Roost. So it's just gotten even better. Gardecuno rose, I'm gonna be honest, I just think this was more a case of it being a little underranked, but particularly with the drop in usage of Paparaja, which was one of the better stoppers to the non-Terra Blast ground or fire sets. Gardecuno's got a lot of leverage around teams. Dark types are all but absent from this metagame outside of like Skuntank. Like right here you can see, and an Alolan Persian, but that mon is not a threat to Gardecuno. I have like 5 attack and I could always Terra Fairy if I need, right? But Gardecuno, I think, has just gotten better in part because of the meta shifting around a little bit. Chansey's kind of annoying, but anytime I feel like Chansey kind of bothers him on, I just have to remind myself, this is Chansey we're talking about. One of the most passive little guys of all time. So it's not really that big a deal. You know, who cares? So, and you've got ways you can tech around Chansey. Like, once again, you got stuff like Terra Ground if you really want to, because Ground Terra's good anyway for blocking Scarf Volt switches, or just faster Volt switches in general. Terra Ghost if you need to block Seismic Toss chip. You could always just also have Psyshock on an offensive set. You could just pop Chansey like that. Not too bad. Decidueye rose up to A-. I think they should have risen even farther, I'm gonna be honest. I think SD Decid is just absolutely vile, cretinous scum. But SD Shadow Sneak bypasses a lot of your options for revenge killing this mon. Something like Jolteon. So you have a Terraized Jolteon. Yeah, that mon's just popped. Scyther, yeah, you better be at full. That mon's getting popped otherwise. Bruxish, you're gonna Scyfangs me? Nope, you're popped. I'm not even gonna finish that sentence. Even like Terra Dark Salazzle, by the way. I think it's +4 Decidueye. If you get 2 SD boosts, you just smoke it. Like, Goodra actually has a use case for Terra normal right now. Just a hard wall Decidueye in my view. It's kind of vile. Sui Electrode Rose as well. Now, one, I would never run Modest on this mon because I think outspeeding the Tatsugiri stands is still too valuable. Also, there's still some mons around base like 80 that you might need to outrun to get a boost. I forget, do you outspeed? I was gonna say, do you outspeed the 85 Scarfers? No, they're hitting 442. I think you're at 439 with Chode. But this mon is not as bad as I thought it was. I've used it a little bit more lately, and I do kind of like the Terra Dark stuff with Foul Play. Once again, it's a nice Bruxish deterrent, but something like Terra Dark Foul Play, if you do Leaf Storm a Goodra, you Foul Play the next turn, oh my lord, you do 1,000,000. It is actually a pretty cool idea. Also, again, something that just helps you versus Decidueye. You'll notice in this tier, Terra Dark is quite good for shutting down offensive mons. The biggest issue will always be this mon is piss weak. I mean, I was talking, Shiloh and I were kind of ragging on a dude in a battle playing for SCL, where their Sui Electrode over the span of 2 turns did a whole 3% to some Goodra, and it's like, ah yes, great work, really good damage, guys. But keep in mind, I went from thinking this mon was nearly unviable to think it was like B- rank or B rank, so it's not a bad mod. I still don't like it that much, but it's a good option. And we got Chansey rising up from B to A. We already know why. Chansey Lug. You shut down a ton of special attackers. It has to be something like Psyshock, or your opponent has to Volt Switch loop you into the Shadow Realm. That's all I'm going to mention. We talked about this enough. I don't need to, you know, talk your ear off again. GLASTRIER rising as well up to A. Kind of like an alternative to Avalugg on those teams if you want to run a different form of removal, where of course Glast provides a ton more offensive power, also beating up on kind of every kind of team, because you have a good matchup into fatter teams, because you're just so bulky, they really can't take you out, and you can always run like Terra Poison or Substitute if you don't want to risk a Toxic hitting you. But you beat up on fat, because the only method they usually have of tanking your attacks is going to be like an Avalugg, and if it's not Curse or Iron Defense, it might not even hold up. And then you've got the matchup versus offensive teams, where you kind of just force them to trade a Pokemon or two to actually KO you. Because again, you're so obese. And you have Terra potentially too to flip a certain matchup on its head. Just overall, this is one of the biggest beneficiaries of how the meta shifted. Same with Ditto. Now, have we seen Ditto? No, this is entirely... Wow, that's not what I meant to do. This is entirely based on just principle of the meta is shifted to very little balance, very much offense and fat for teams. So Ditto, you know, works out really, really well. Frostlass Rose, just like Skier, I have no reason for this. Use Lycanroc, it's just better. You click one button, and then you're done. Mesprit rises all the way from B- to A-. The Queen is back, baby. And Mesprit's really good because, yeah, you Psyshock those Chansey spammers, and they don't know what to do anymore. Their brain breaks. And it helps too. Dark types are pretty absent entirely from the meta, so you don't even need to burn your Terra a lot of the time. I mean, Ghost types still exist. You got like Hoopla, you got Decidueye, you got Mismagius, so you'll still often Terra, but it means you could drop Terra Fairy if you want. You could do something like Terra Electric T-Bolt. Options are a little bit more diverse, I'd say, right now. Even like Terra Steel and just run, you know, Psyshock plus some other coverage. You got some options. Muck Rising to B, I don't know. I don't know, guys. I think the biggest reason, actually, now I got the reason for you, Florges. If they're not Terra Blast ground, you do kind of just dunk on Florges, which is a great niche. So like you run into the Terra Fire set, you're pretty well off. You can always knock its item as well, which is good. Otherwise, just limiting Specs' ability to break, CM's ability to sweep. I mean, look, with how good Florges is right now, this is necessary. Skuntank goes up to B+. This is partly because people are finally discovering how good some of its utility options are. Because again, it got knockoff. It still has T-Spike. It's got like Foul Play, so we've seen a little bit of Scarf Skuntank with Foul Play. A nice little deterrent to things like SD Scyther if they're not looking to try and pop you with a quick attack. helps you out as well versus something like Decidueye, which can, you know, resist the Shadow Sneak, so it's never revenge killing you. Generally, kind of some nice traits. Avalugg goes all the way to A+ from C. I think it was a little bit of an overreaction. I voted it to, like, A. But yeah, I mean, Table is really, really good. You shut down just about every physical attacker known to man. And with how few options for removal we have, having one that is this consistent, especially, again, look at our hazard setters, please tell me which ones are actually beating Table. The best one might be, like, Toxic Gligar, but that's about it. All the others kind of just lose. You gotta run, like, Iron Head Copper Roger right now, entirely because stupid Table's just walling you anyway. Like, look at that. Again, I've showed the Heavy Slam calcs before. You don't even 4-hit KO, I think, or you barely 4-hit KO. It's really, really bad. Something like a Lilith Persian now we see going up, which I said to GXC. I told this man, hey, you should try Lilith Persian. I think it's okay. And he said, it sounds kind of shit. And look at that. It went up to B. It's just kind of nice with how fast it is. It's kind of a similar idea to Avalugg, but you're just faster. And no physical attacker is putting you down. And in any of them that set up, so like, again, Decidueye will just always be the easiest one to mention here. You just foul play it for 5 million damage and it dies. And then Volbeat rises to B-. I have no clue why. Manual Weather does not see real use. Why are we rising Volbeat? We just unranked, like, every Sunmon, and then they're like, oh no, but Volbeat should be B-, guys. But, I mean, yeah, it is one of the best Manual Weather supporters. I just don't know why we're rising it now. And yeah, let's get the drops. We have 1 million, so some of these will get speed ran through, because I just won't have a lot to say, but, you know. So Goodra finally drops. Part of this is because Chansey is everywhere, and although you can just knock Chansey's Eviolite off and you're still happy about that, it does mean that Goodra as a wall breaker is kind of a concept that's slowly fading away, especially when you take into account Florkus and Klefki. You can't spam Draco for free like you used to be able to, even with Copper Roger kind of falling off, which, you know, does suck. Jolteon drops. I have absolutely no clue why this mon dropped, because all you have to do is Volt Switch spam on these stupid fat teams forever. I think the Jolteon drop was just a bad call, but you know, it's not wrong what it's saying. Jolteon actually breaking through teams is a lot harder to do now. It's kind of like the same with Gligar Rising, and how Jolteon for a while has wanted to run more Terra Fairy. Just because, you know, Scarf Fighters, strong Sucker Punches, there have been a lot of things dissuading that Terra Ice from letting it just dominate teams defensively, or offensively, because yeah, your ground type, no more. Your special wall, I Volt Switch on. I do think we could actually see a return of Terra Ice Jolteon for what it's worth. Based on the VR votes, people are actually thinking that Toxicroak isn't as good as it was, and of course we don't have Brute Bonnet or Grim anymore. So, I mean, Sucker Punch threats, where are they? Where are they? So, maybe, you know, hey, try some more Terra Ice Jolts. Rotomo drops to A. I think we could have dropped it to A-. The Mon just isn't worth it. Jolteon and H-Trode, wildly enough, are generally just preferred because of the speed. And locking into either, you know, Volt Switch is kind of hard to spam right now because, I mean, Jolteon. But also stuff like Gligar, that's hard to deal with. And then Leaf Storm spam. Do you want to give free turns to Goodra? No? Okay. Do you want to let any of the stupid setup sweepers set up by locking in a Leaf Storm and then just becoming the easiest to exploit mon ever? No? Okay. But I think the biggest reason, because some of y'all might wonder, okay, but Rotomo is, you know, God tier in Sword and Shield NU, so what happened? Well, of course, part of it's just losing Defog. Pain Split as well. Actually, Pain Split's a pretty big loss, especially when you look at this meta. But losing Defog is huge, because one of the reasons Rotomo dominates Sword and Shield NU is roll compression. And it doesn't do that as well this gen, because you don't have Defog. You're stuck on Scarf Sets running like Leaf Storm, Volt Switch, Trick, and then like Will-O-Wisp, or like Foul Play, which Foul Play is actually pretty good right now, but, you know, there's a lot less that you got going on there, losing Defog and Pain Split both. You're just not as good of a utility mon. Then Shaman drops to A. Once again, I think this could have gone a little further. I just think the mon's a tad overrated, but, you know, meta dominated by Goodra, Lazzle, Chansey. It's just hard for Shaman to really function how it wants to. In a lot of games, it ends up playing purely a supportive role. That supportive role just isn't good enough for it to be all the way up in A+ anymore. Also, Sandaconda continuing to fall off a cliff in favor of Gligar. You just walled Sandaconda, where something like Gligar, I mean, it can U-turn on you, which kind of sucks. Tatsugiri drops because his mon is terrible, and I will not listen to any other comments. Of course, the Fraility is the biggest thing, because if you want to try and do some nasty plot setup stuff, it's quite hard. And as a spinner, it's just not very good, because you want to switch into the hazard setters, and Gligar can do like half your health with one Earthquake. And then, of course, Florges dropping doesn't do it any favors. Chansey being super dominant doesn't do it any favors. It's still kind of easy to revenge kill, even if it gets a rapid spin speed boost, because something like Hisui and Electrode is still faster, and then like a lot of our Scarfers like Heracross and Paldean Tauros are just still faster. Altaria fell off a cliff, and yeah, like Skier says here, like it does have defog. It's just really, really easy to exploit because it doesn't threaten anything. And this one's also kind of funny because the first few weeks of SCL, we saw Perish Trap ult kind of dominate. It was super, super consistent. And now we just don't see it used at all. I don't have a lot to comment on ult because, frankly, the fall off of this mon felt very sudden. I think maybe the biggest reason is ult fit a lot better alongside Caparaja and those types of cores. But now that we've seen Gligar, Chansey, Avalugg even rise up, it's just kind of hard to find spots on teams for Altaria. Zong drops because, honestly, although it's good roll comp, I find that it's a little too easily exploited. And then Iron Press sets are just way overrated as well. They're just not that good. I mean, again, the thing with Iron Press Zong is just a lot of mods can Terra into whatever they want to resist your body press. And yes, Zong gets coverage for a lot of those common types, so you could have like Shadow Ball if you needed a Ghost type. You could have Psychic if you needed a Poison. You could have Heavy Slam or something for a Fairy. The problem is, we're not running all of those. And two, if you run too many of those, then you don't have Rest. And okay, well, have fun. You will just get overwhelmed. And its Stealth Rock sets are just, I mean, they're kind of just there. I just don't think they do anything too unique that something like a Chansey doesn't do already. Quillfish drops. I honestly am okay with this. I think Gligar is just taking over the premier physical wall. And so, Quillfish, although it's still a really good mon, you know, a little bit less of a use case nowadays for it. Also doesn't help that you're a water type that just gets folded up by Salazzle. Sandaconda falls off entirely because, yeah, why am I using Conda? I got Palisand, which is shore up and doesn't have to rely on Shedskin to wake up. I got Gligar, which is, you know, as we've established, God itself. I got Piloswine, which gives me a Jolteon hard wall, and even kind of a Salazzle hard wall. Made with thick fat and special bulk investment, you just beat Salazzle. So, I just don't find any time I really want to use Sandaconda. Even like Glare spam doesn't really move me anymore. It's very, very sad, but the mon is just not what it used to be. Gligar especially has sapped a lot of it because Gligar is just a better stat checker. Magneton drops. People aren't moved by the wall breaker sets right now, which I kind of don't get because Analytic Volt Switch spam on Chansey is very, very good, and you just fold up Gligar like a lawn chair with Flash Cannon. Same with Florges. But okay, we're dropping Magneton, sure. Passimian dropped off, you know, a cliff. I just don't see why you'd use Passimian. And I've talked about it a couple times. The biggest reason is, right now, you're kind of forced into Terra Dark on it, so that you don't get revenge killed by a lot of stuff. But that means you're not Terra Fight. It also just feels like there's more natural resistances nowadays to CC. I think that's maybe the bigger one. And Passimian's whole reason for being so good in the previous metas, you know, disregarding that it was literally like the only good Scarfer anyway. One of the biggest things that made Passimian so good back then was you had the godly CC spam. And really, teams had to Terra to tank your CC. Nowadays, we look at some of the top mons. I mean, there's stuff like Salazzle, which it's going to take a million, but it'll live, right? There's Bruxish, which is just faster. There's Gligar, which, of course, eats it up. Gardecuno eats it up. Decidueye, literally immune to it. Mesprit eats it up. Like, there's so many Pokemon that just don't let you CC spam. And then, like, why am I using this over Heracross or Paldean Tauros or Toxicroak? This mod has exactly one set that is threatening, and that is it. So, it's just not worth it anymore, sadly enough. When Bombardier falls off a little bit more, I think part of this is people aren't so sold on Bombardier's stats anymore. As weird as that sounds, I think Bombardier is just kind of getting power crept out of the tier. And the need to have a Dark type on your team isn't as high as you'd like it to be. Dark types are still quite good. And we talked about a couple mons through this video that do necessitate respecting them, such as Decidueye, Mesprit, even Hoopa. Bombardier is just kind of not, you know, it's not looked at the same way as it used to be, because Bombardier's role comp was a lot better in the previous metagame, where you wanted it for rocks a lot of the time. Its knockoff was far more valued, and its pivoting plus longevity just, you know, rounds it out to be a very good mon. Well, rocker options we got plenty now. Ground immunes we got plenty of now. Knockoff, that move is on every Pokemon now. You know, pivots, we're not hard-pressed for pivots in this tier. Here's literally 2 of them right in a row. And then another one right there. And here, technically. And here, and here. And they're everywhere, man. Bombardier just doesn't have a lot to offer anymore. Knackle stack drops because this mon was never very good to begin with. And it just gets smacked around by Salazzle anyway because you get knocked. And then you kind of just lose. Earthworm dropping. I think people just really want Blissey back because Blissey Earthworm is such a dastardly combo. But it doesn't really help that Avalugg is taken over. Again, like we talked about Avalugg, even Gligar. Those, you know, the premier physical walls. A lot of Earthworm's niche is that it is a great physical wall. And when you got mons that are just doing it better, it can be tough. Now it is a flying resist, so it kind of is a Scyther check. You just get beat down by CC. Like, it's a great physical wall. It's just not a good enough physical wall because the HP stat's kind of low. So moves like +2 Scyther CC still just puts you in a box, and it sucks. Sandslash drops. I think people kind of think Sand's a little worse right now. And then you have, again, the Gligar rise, the Avalugg rise. People aren't too convinced also if Sandslash is like an independent physical wall. So yeah, a little drop. Sneasel, once again, we talked about it earlier, the mon's just not really found a consistent spot on teams, so that kind of hurts it. I think it's probably better than this rank suggests, but, you know, as well, Avalugg is everywhere. You are going to have to hope that you can get that knock, and then get your Helk Rock, your Stealth Rock to actually stay. It's another one of those mons where you need a lot of things going right to where it works. Olive Tree drops a little bit more. I'm kind of shocked it's still ranked, but, you know, Goodra and Chansey are 2 pretty noted walls you gotta get by. So yeah, Indeedee, this, I thought, I literally voted to unrank it, I'm gonna be honest. This mon is not good. It doesn't do anything. It's just, it's not a convincing breaker. It's like surprisingly weak because of the loss of expanding force. And I think, in spite of the speed, I'd rather use Hoopa a lot of the time because Hoopa's a lot better at breaking through Chansey. And we got Primeape drop. There was like a little bit of concern when Primeape dropped to NU and back in like, what, September? October? I think September, October, that it'd be OP. That's just not been the case. Even with the Violite, this mon has no bulk because it's a Primeape. And unlike Annihilate, you're not a Ghost type, so you have to Terra if you want to have Stab on Rage Fist. Which makes Rage Fist a lot less broken on this mon, because, you know, you need the boosts. Or you want the initial boost, and you don't have Stab without Terastallizing. Also, since you have to hold it to Violite, you don't have leftovers, meaning getting random little Rage Fist boosts by switching Primeape maybe into like a weak U-turn, it's not as easy to do, because you don't have the passive recovery. Something like Annihilate could get away with that, because okay, I switch in, maybe I even take a little bit of Hazard Strip, but I'm at least getting some health back. Primeape's just dying when it does that. It's not very helpful. Hisui Quill keeps dropping because it's just... Well, again, it's another mon that just doesn't see use, and a lot of this mon's usefulness is tied into loading into very specific matchups, where there is a, like, Hoopa to check, which could still knock you off, by the way, or an SD to Sid, or a very specific Mesprit set. It is like specialized wall to the nth degree. And then we get Uxie drop because Mesprit is simply better. Also because if I want a physical wall that offers me some you know, amount of utility, well, I'm going Gligar. Weezing continues to drop because this gen, it's like... Weezing's usefulness in a lot of older gens, I feel, has been tied into either T-Spike's support or Taunt just being absurd. And Taunt is not that useful this gen because we don't have bulky setup mons in the that are like Snorlax Scrafty types, where Weezing can just beat them 1v1 once it taunts them. A lot of the bulky setup mons this gen, something like Calm Mind to Dunsparce, you just get packed up. And it's not too, you know, not too ideal. Lurantis drops, even though it's a defogger, people just aren't moved by it. I mean, it's not a bad mon. It probably could have stayed B-. It's kind of another case of we need to see this mon get used more. Also doesn't help, again, any defogger that gets toxic by Gligar is probably not going to have the best of luck. Anyhow, Oricorio Pau drops to C. The only reason it's still ranked is because of Oricorio PTSD. This mon is not good at all. And I'm convinced that, once again, the hesitance to just vote on Oricorio forms down from NUBL is killing the tier, because we are not tiering actively enough. But that's beside the point, don't use that mon. And Samurot's just bad. I mean, why am I using this over the other water types? Why am I using, what is it doing over Bruxish? Please, tell me. What am I running? What, why? Am I running over Bruxish? Am I stronger? No. Am I faster? No. Am I bulkier? Probably, but I don't care. Do I have knockoff? Yes, but do I care? No. There's just nothing this mon does that I'm like actually impressed by. The only thing it kind of can do is run a mixed set, and I'd rather just run any other wall breaker because Samurot's so weak. Anyhow, that's it for the VR update, guys. I hope y'all enjoyed. We will have probably another one in about a month from now, once we've got the next thing of tier shifts. And that'll be a pretty big shift, I believe, too. December tier shifts are supposed to give us, like, DLC 1 stuff. And then we're supposed to get, in the middle of the month, DLC 2 NFEs, so that's gonna be hype. Until next time, though, guys, enjoy your day, and I'll catch you then. Peace.